Americas. Now we're looking at politics across the border now in Scotland, because the Scottish National Party is looking at a new leader after Humza Yousaf resigned earlier this week.
Yeah, well, as you know, the party survived a vote of no confidence on Tuesday. Was it Wednesday? I've lost track of the days this week. I think it was Wednesday.
I think it was Wednesday.
I think it was Wednesday.
Yes, and now the former deputy leader of the SNP, John Swinney, is expected to announce he's going to be standing today. And he could be running unopposed, as Kate Forbes ruled out standing herself.
Let's talk to the journalist Alastair Stewart, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning. I mean, we look like a straightforward coronation here, then, don't we, of John Swinney? Is that going to keep the SNP happy? Is he the continuity candidate that we keep hearing about?
It's more of the same for the SNP. The early polls indicated that Mr. Swinney was the preferred party candidate, but that Kate Forbes was actually the preferred candidate that the country would like to see become the First Minister. There's several issues that are facing Mr. Swinney immediately. One is the most ironic of all, and that is legitimacy, that the SNP at Holyrood have been complaining and using the Tory party as a bogeyman for a very long time, saying that they keep crowning leaders without going to the country. Now, Mr. Yousaf was elected last year by the party. He wasn't elected by the country. And the very same is now going to happen here. So straight out the gate, Mr. Swinney is facing a massive challenge of legitimacy as to why it is that he gets to sit in the centre chair at all without facing the country.
So Kate Forbes has stood aside. The Scottish Tory leader, Douglas Ross, has called this decision to back Swinney a shady backroom deal. What do you make of the optics of this?
There's certainly the accusation that Kate Forbes has stepped aside under a degree of pressure. It's been reported that she's going to receive the keys to quite a senior position in Mr. Swinney's government. Clearly, the party recognise, even behind the scenes, that things are not going well optics-wise, or indeed practically. This whole situation starts Humza Yousaf, the incumbent First Minister for now, through the Greens out of government. They were propping up a SNP minority administration. I think senior SNP leadership has now finally caught on to the idea that once you remove independence as an attainable reality, not much is left policy-wise, because they've been in power for so long, 17 years. And that it's getting increasingly hard to point the finger at anyone except themselves. Mr. Swinney has been a senior figure in the party for a great deal of that time. He's been a senior figure in government for a great deal of that time. So some kind of deal has very likely been struck that's trying to put continuity first, a degree of practicality to ensure that they can govern at all.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, they're between a rock and a hard place, in a way, aren't they? I mean, as much as Kate Forbes may want the job, and as much as, the polls may show that, the SNP supporters across the country would prefer her to have the top job, if that would mean that the Greens won't support her, which I think is probably quite likely, certainly on some key issues for which she's better known, then they can't govern at all.
That's absolutely correct, but it's worth bearing in mind as well that the elements that were attacking Kate Forbes in the first leadership run that she made last year were accusing her of being an extremist Christian in quotations. Now, John Swinney is also a man of faith. Last week, Mr. Yousaf came out encouraging people not to criticise candidates because of their religion. John Swinney is going to have to work very hard to assuage the Greens at Holyrood, because the numbers, it's a game of mathematics, the numbers are simply not there for the SNP. This is very, very much not over by any stretch of the imagination for the woes of the SNP. We need to get a First Minister elected. It's suspected that Mr. Yousaf could resign as early as Monday because there's no immediate challenger to John Swinney. The Parliament then has 28 days to get a First Minister in place, and then it's a case of governing the whole thing. And they're going to be very reliant, that's to say the SNP, on support from the Green Party, which immediately limits the options available to John Swinney and what he might like to do when he takes over.
On that note, Alastair, what do you think this means for the matter of Scottish independence? Because in John Swinney's press conference, he spoke about wanting to unite the SNP and unite Scotland for independence. But that's going to be a lot harder than it sounds.
Absolutely. And I had not quite guessed that it would be the SNP themselves that killed independence as a conversation for the generation that was once talked about. There is no vehicle for which the party members can realistically believe that independence is an obtainable goal in the near future or even within the next fabled generation. It's an impossibility. They don't have the support there within themselves to organise around how they would even do it. And if you remove that, how do you appease members who've signed up to the SNP, support the SNP and see the SNP as an umbrella vehicle to achieve independence? If you take that off the table and you have a disarray of policies and domestic woes as Scotland does, there's serious challenges there facing Mr. Swinney, not only as a new First Minister, but existentially as a leader of the SNP. If the SNP can't achieve independence, what's the point of them?
Just a quick thought, because it's not the first time that he's been the leader of the SNP. Of course, he was leader in between Alex Salmond's two hits, wasn't he, back in the early 2000s, where he was sort of considered not to have done very well. Will we see the same sort of leadership from him, or will he have learnt, do we think?
In fairness to Mr. Swinney, when he was leader back in the day, as they say, his was much more of a consensus style. He's got a soft touch. You could say about Mr. Swinney, as what was said about Alec Douglas Hume, is that he's steel painted as wood. There is a great deal of substance to him. But I think you need a leader, that's to say the SNP need a leader at the moment that's combative, that's prepared to go out and make the case for independence and the party and present radical plans. Mr. Swinney is actually the candidate who works best for the country, if we're going to take it that far. He's got much more of a consensus style. That's his strength. He's broadly seen politically as respectable in that way and someone that you can do deals with. So that will work well for opposition parties, but not necessarily for the SNP membership, who are increasingly becoming slightly bitter towards the fact that independence is a pipe dream that's going to show absolutely no chance of realising itself anytime soon.